Gina. I'm obviously one of the client directors here at the Ortus Club.
Heath, I'm Chief Marketing Officer for the Americas and EMEA at Invesco.
Amazing. So could you tell us a little bit about Invesco?
So fundamentally, we, in simple terms, which is the terms I try and think about it, we look after people's money and make it grow in accordance with kind of broadly what they want to achieve out of it in terms of the time length they want to be invested for and maybe the types of strategies and capabilities they want to be invested for. But when you think about, people like you and me, we're basically looking after your future, if you like, particularly your retirement, which for me is a bit closer than for you. But, hopefully we'll get there in the end and we'll want to sort of retire with dignity. So we try and help people do that.
I mean, I hope mine's closer than I think it is. But
you never know.
Probably not. Okay, perfect. So if you could tell us a little bit about your role at Invesco.
And it's probably indicative of how I think CMO roles have evolved quite a lot over maybe the last 10, 15 years in particular. But yeah, fundamentally the role is to say, can we bring our brand and our services and our capabilities to life for our customers who are largely a sort of business to consumer kind of organization. So our customers would typically be people like financial advisors, but also big institutions. So people who look after our pensions, people who look after insurance, sovereign wealth funds of different countries. So we have a big range of clients, but by and large, it's easier to think of them as if you like other businesses. And the marketing role is really to bring, as I say, everything to life in terms of what we do to be as relevant as we can be, because our clients, probably like all of us, are bombarded every day with information and content and ideas and research and things that other people no doubt think are fascinating for them and probably aren't always. So we work as hard as we can to be relevant, to use marketing channels to engage with clients at a time when we think we've got something to say, rather than necessarily just because, it's April, where's my Invesco newsletter? Like that sort of marketing, I think, belongs in the past. And increasingly, I think the role is about technology, how that can come to play in the marketing environment in the broadest sense, whether that's, inevitably lots of conversations about AI, and there are lots of interesting things going on there, but also just marketing automation technology and using rich data sources in ways to be relevant to clients. And the final thing I'd say is, it feels to me that marketing's role as kind of the voice of the client or the voice of the customer is more important today than it's ever been, and I think is being taken more seriously in the boardroom than it ever has been. And I think that is a responsibility of marketeers to kind of keep organizations honest to what their customers want rather than what they want to sell them or get them to buy. So it's a pretty wide-ranging role, which makes it fun and interesting, as well as obviously kind of challenging and difficult at times. That's the nature of it.
Yeah, I think you're so true. Like, marketing used to be almost like a nice to have, and now it's seen as, it's so integral to everything. And of course, we'll touch on AI and all that you mentioned.
Sure.
Don't worry, it comes up in some of the questions. So I guess what I'd like to know is, as of right now, we're in April, what are your main focuses right now in your role and in marketing?
Yeah, fair question. So there's sort of different levels of focus. So there is a strand of focus around the things our clients are most interested in at the moment, which in our sector would be things like fixed income capabilities, private markets, so things like real estate and private credit, other ways of investing, things like ETFs, so passive investment. So we will always look at the commercial priorities of our clients and our firm and try and bring those to life. But in terms of the more pure marketing thing, I guess the big focus for us is on a few different strands. One is differentiation. We operate in an industry, bluntly, of pretty poor brands. Like, it's extraordinary for an industry of our scale that over the years, and I think this is changing, back to my answer about what marketing does, but brands haven't maybe been taken as seriously as they have been in other industries as opportunities to differentiate and sort of capture what makes us different from others. So we are working hard on a brand platform. It's around Let's Rethink Possibility, which is really all about trying to work alongside our clients as partners to find new solutions, because the industry is changing so fast. So the brand differentiation level is important. One other level, which I've just mentioned, is how we can intelligently use our data and our understanding of clients in a useful way to be more relevant to them. So to talk about the things of interest to them in the channels that we know that particular client might like to engage us in, and in a way which sort of piques their interest. And that can be a whole range of things. Sometimes, to be honest, it's just about getting the right information in front of them at the right time. It can sound quite basic, but that's much harder to do than it maybe appears on the surface. So it can just be very informational, but obviously it can be educational. We have a lot of very complex but interesting products, and it's absolutely in our interest and our clients' interest and their clients' interest that they're clearly understood in terms of the role that they can play, but also an inspiration role. Like all good marketing, we are here to have ideas, to be interesting, to have a point of view, to try and provoke discussion. So we work really hard on that sort of relevance layer. And the final thing I think is making sure that we are as efficient and effective as we possibly can be. I think like every single job function, the CMO function now has a lot of pressure to be accountable, to spend money wisely, to use technology in ways that can make you more efficient. So we always try and be very alive to like the possibility of, is there another way to do that? Is there a better way to do that? Is there a cheaper way to do that, but that has better outcomes? Is there a more efficient way to look at this A to B process and so on? So that's a kind of ongoing thing. So there's lots of strands to what we do, but I think it's the intersection of those commercial priorities and the bigger things that the bigger levers we can pull around brand and around relevance and sort of client engagement.
Amazing. Thank you. You said a couple of things there. There's, I guess, a new pressure to be accountable and to be conscious of where you're spending money. Budgets are always a difficult topic, especially when it comes to, I guess, marketing, because ROI is so difficult to calculate in our field. That's always a challenge. But what is the biggest challenge, I guess, you're facing as a CMO in April 2025 when it comes to budgeting and getting approvals and ROI?
Kind of provable accountability. So, I've operated with lots of different brands. My background's much more in marketing services rather than, in an organization running marketing. And in some of those scenarios, particularly in kind of bigger business to consumer enterprises, you could measure marketing ROI pretty accurately. It is much harder when we are hand in glove partners with our sales team. So we don't really draw much of a distinction between the sales function and the marketing function in our organization, because if we don't collaborate really closely, we'll unquestionably fail. And from our client's point of view, we're just Invesco. Like they don't really, wouldn't draw a particular distinction between different types of activities. So I think in that environment, of course, it makes it more complicated to prove value, but we absolutely do make progress in that. And we can look at the leads that we generate and whether they eventually convert. We can look at the information, the sort of richer view of clients that we can provide to our sales teams. We look at what we would term momentum, which is, let's say Christina comes to our website, we don't know who she is. She gets interested in a particular topic. She maybe comes to an online webinar. She maybe asks for some more information. So maybe, it's a bit of a literal sort of example, but, that is momentum for us towards potentially an eventual sale or at least an eventual RFP or whatever. So we look at kind of where our prospects are and see whether or not we're being efficient from a marketing point of view and sort of encouraging them to move appropriately at their own pace down what from our point of view is a bit of a pipeline from a client point of view, which is more important, is just a kind of journey of discovering what we do and why we do it. So making that as easy as possible and as interesting as possible and as relevant as possible is a big part of what we try and do and what we try and measure. But it is always tough. I think in a lot of business to business style engagements where there are lots of sales teams involved in selling complex products, it's always quite hard and probably a bit of a fool's errand to try too hard to pull the marketing effect separately from the sales team effect, because I don't know why that's that interesting. It's like in the end, it's the combined effect working, and you can probably get too hung up over trying to seek the glory for sort of some parts of the equation, which isn't, I don't know that that's a very interesting use of time.
Yeah, we do. I run sort of focus groups and webinars for marketers, and the last topic was on ROI, and how you follow that through. If you do an event, how you follow that through your CRM and through the funnel, and if sales closes it, is it attributed to marketing? Because maybe they did see some sign somewhere that encouraged them to go to the website. It's so hard to put like, this came from this one campaign that we did. They saw this bus.
It's really hard. It's probably impossible, and as I say, probably a foolish use of time to try and, as long as the combination is effective and as long as you have some sense of what the marketing component is doing, but not entirely separately from the sales component, we're kind of all good with that. If we succeed, we succeed together, and if we fail, we definitely fail together. So one of the things that we really work hard at is an incredibly close partnership To us, distribution is about marketing and sales together, not about one in service of the other or whatever. It just doesn't work.
So that kind of transitions well to the next set of questions, which are sort of around sales, which we touched on a bit already. But I guess, what are your sales teams and sales department most excited about when you are coming up with ideas and campaigns? And, as a CMO, you're putting together the strategic plan for marketing for 2025. Do the sales team have initiatives they prefer, or, are they coming to you with ideas?
Yeah, it's a good question. The latter, definitely. They do. I mean, one of the joys and perils of marketing is everybody has an opinion, because we're all consumers. So we do. And by the way, I don't think that's a bad thing. Like, I'm not one of these CMOs that puts his head in his hands every time someone comes to my office with a good or a bad idea. I think it's actually good that we're an actively discussed topic within most businesses, and that people are interested in what we can provide. I think in terms of your question about, what are they excited around? I think they are genuinely excited by this whole program of brand differentiation and what can we achieve, and can we actually stand out from the pack in a category where there definitely are some brands, and there's some fabulous brands, but also there's a lot of blands that aren't really brands. So I think they're really buying into the idea that we can actually, the culture in our business is very strong, and our clients will always say that. So trying to sort of bottle that and capture it in a way that really encourages people to understand what we can offer, I think they absolutely buy into that. I think they're increasingly fascinated by the world of data and accurate targeting and relevance, because the honest reality for us is that our clients number, I'm going to say, in the tens of thousands, if you like, in terms of clients who can make significant decisions about significant investments across both regions. So it's still a sizable audience, but when you think about the population of Europe and America and Africa, it's a tiny group of people. So the fact that we can be thoughtful about how to reach that group of people, and not, if you like, waste our money talking to people who is a waste of time for them as well. They're not probably that interested in what we do. That is a sort of real learning curve for them. And I think what they recognize is that the value of their understanding of clients and the way that they can capture that and feed it back to us is profoundly useful to us, and adds value to the whole distribution mechanism of sales and marketing. So we've worked hard to get folks to really understand that, get them on board with that, and I think they like that. And the final thing I'd say, which I think is just true of marketing, is they like the stuff not everyone likes everything we do, of course, but they like the stuff we do. We do some quite interesting sort of creative work and some things that are engaging. We have a product called QQQ, which is an enormous ETF product, which we just launched in Hong Kong with a drone show. So, it's not that often that you necessarily get to do stuff like that. So I think, there are things that we do and events and things that we run that sort of capture their imagination. And I think that's kind of important, because I think it is I genuinely think part of the role of marketing is to bring a bit of fun and joy and engagement into people's lives. And I wouldn't ever want, it's an art and science discipline, but I wouldn't ever want the science part of the discipline to completely cloud the art side of the discipline, because there is still a bit of, you just need to have a bit of intuition and take a few sensible risks around your activity in order to actually do something that's a bit different. So I think they like all of that stuff. But yeah, they're full of ideas, and that's fine.
Where did the drone show idea come? That's a nice combination, I guess, of science and art in this.
Yeah, it probably was. I think it was, it's just a way. This is a really substantial product. It's one of the biggest exchange traded funds in the world. We're looking obviously to extend that franchise into other regions. It's been hugely successful in the Americas. So it was really a way of, I guess, making a bit of a statement of arrival. The day you list on an exchange is quite a big day, and just getting the right audience there and just doing something which perhaps feels different and engaging, and not just someone standing in a lectern and reading out a speech about how fantastic the product is, but actually just trying to do something with a bit of impact to then surround all of that more normal activity that of course you need around, as I was saying, education, but with something that sort of captures the imagination a bit. So yeah, it's nice to be able to do both.
Yeah, this is all of the questions are transitioning great into next sections. It's amazing. So I was going to ask, what's the most successful event or engagement piece that you've hosted? But I mean, I think we can use the example of the drones as
yeah. I mean, it's so varied, because it depends so much what it is. Like, we definitely work hard at live events, which are still really important places to meet our clients and be able to discuss with them, what they're interested in and see how that fits with what we're doing. So we always try to make an impact. This isn't unusual, but I have a real mantra around trying to do fewer things, but do them really well. If clients in our industry could probably go to an event, well, I'm sure they could, every day of the week, every hour of the day. They're not going to choose to do that. So if we pick places and times where we believe our clients are going to be there, it's going to be at a time of interest in what we do, then we will work really hard to engage them, to have stuff that's not always the drone show scale, but things that are just of interest and pique interest and help us to stand out from others. So that sort of live brand experience is still really important, as I said, particularly for a company like ours, where our culture and our people are a huge amount of who we are, really. So trying to capture that is an important job for marketing.
Yeah, and I think in the nature of what you do, it's kind of hard to get that across in the culture and the people. So important, like in-person events are obviously for us super important as well.
Of course they are. Yeah.
So it's all, what we do. So I guess, what are some of the challenges you face when hosting events? I know we kind of touched on your ICP is such a small group, and they're sort of overwhelmed with options of events that they can go to. Are there other sort of challenges you face when looking at hosting events? Like, obviously they're so spread out around the world as well. How do you pick the geography you host in?
Yeah, we work hard on geography. I mean, it would tend to be the obvious sort of financial centers where things are, where people will come. So I think it's a combination of where it is, let's call it a classic financial services sort of investment management event. We'll think hard about the audience, think hard about the kind of things that we do that they'll be interested in, and then step back and say, well, how can we activate that just in a way that's a bit different. So I think when it's those kinds of events, it's just thinking hard about your presence, and as you said, like, how do you capture the spirit of what you do? I think when it's sort of the other way around and you're seeking the audience at a different sort of event and trying to show up. So if I go back to QQQ again, we're sponsoring quite a lot of sort of high-end food events, for example, because we know that that's a big passion for our audience, and we can show up in their lives, as it were. And because I think often in B2B enterprises, people forget that business to business audiences are just people as well. They might do ordinary things. So, if we can show up in a place where we're going to be relevant and still interesting, but actually it's something that, they're going to enjoy, then we will also look at sort of balancing out very classic asset management events with sort of other places and times when we can just show up and hopefully, grab their attention and be interesting without being too, in inverted commas, salesy about what we're doing. So it is a balance for us. But live events remain really important to what we do, for sure.
More awareness, advertise at the Masters, but maybe not at Coachella, it's like,
yes. Yeah, exactly. It's thinking hard about the audience, rather than just showing up for the sake of it.
So what career advice would you give to someone who was starting out in marketing now in 2025? Other than
it's a good question. I mean, I should say I think it's still a great career. Like, it's evolved a lot, and it's definitely become more of this blend of art and science, and a good understanding of sort of digital and technology and stuff is now just a necessary part of life. I think my overall advice, and maybe it's sort of generic anyway, but is just be curious and be brave. I talk to a lot of our new starters who all seem to be terrifyingly bright and interested, but I just like it when they ask questions and when they're curious and when they challenge things and test things, because new starters, younger people are always going to bring a different perspective, and they are ultimately, the future of all of our companies are ultimately people who may be 20 today, but eventually they're going to be ancient like me. So I think encourage them to be curious and ask questions, and don't be scared to challenge, and be a voice because you've got something to say. So just because you're junior doesn't mean you haven't got every right to sort of challenge things and unpick things a bit. But I still think it's a fun career. It's a bit of a privilege to do this kind of work, because I just always feel so many people in the world don't do jobs that they love, and we are unbelievably lucky to do a job that we enjoy. So it's almost sort of responsibility to make the most of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Is there a piece of traditional leadership advice that you heard or have heard over the years that you think is now irrelevant or doesn't really apply to the role of marketing now?
And again, maybe it's a bit more generic, but I think certainly when I started work, I feel that work life was still much more hierarchical than it is today. So I think back to what I was saying about advice for younger people to speak up, and that was just harder, I think. And life was a bit more hierarchical, more generally. Perhaps it's changed a lot over the last 30 years or so. But I think that sort of, not necessarily spoken advice, but that sense of no, you know your place, which is to run around and type up reports and look after clients and all that, carry bags. That's just changed. It doesn't mean that more junior roles aren't still incredibly hard work, and you still have to learn stuff and do stuff, and it is the only way to learn. But I think that the whole world of sort of hierarchy was falling apart. I think in COVID it completely kind of exploded, largely in a good way. So I think the work environment now is one that's just, when it's right, should be a much safer place for people just to have opinions and feel like no one's going to judge them for saying this, that, or the other, or for being this, that, or the other person, or whatever. And I think that's a great thing. So I think some of that, not necessarily advice, but that slightly unspoken world of no, you have to earn the right to do this, or you have to do 3 years of this before you can do that. I think that's changed, and I think that's a very good thing.
Yeah, I saw something on LinkedIn the other day, and it was like, if your CMO or marketing team aren't coming to you with ideas that make you feel a little bit nervous,
that's a worry.
You need a new marketing team, or you need.
I think that's very true. Yeah, I think we are there to push boundaries a bit, not in a crazy way, but yeah, I always feel that if someone else thinks they could have come up with the marketing, we're not doing our job properly, because they probably could, and that means it's deeply average. We should always be trying to push and move on and find new things, which is part of the fun of the job.
Amazing. Okay. For the next 10 years, what do you think marketing will look like?
I think it will. I think in some ways, like a lot of things, it will change to remain the same, if you know what I mean. I think marketing remains about being relentlessly driven by customer needs and wants, by really trying to differentiate your brand from others. I genuinely don't think those things will change. I think they get more complex. I think the way it will evolve is, I think, there will be unimaginable leaps in artificial intelligence, without doubt. And when you look at things like marketing agents and stuff, there's lots of interesting stuff going to happen, which I don't actually think is necessarily very threatening to human marketing workers, but I think it will be interesting. I think, like a lot of things, there was so much chat about big data whenever, like 15 years ago, and as usual, it was all a bit hype ahead of its time. But the reality is now we can do extraordinary things with data, both from a sort of data richness point of view and from a kind of predictive point of view, and lots of clever stuff. I think that will continue to accelerate. So it will be this art and science blend with, some science knowledge, as it were. But I do think the fundamentals the tasks will remain the same. The way in which you execute them maybe is different. And in a word, I don't know, maybe it's an odd word, but I think sort of champion, because I think we are here to champion what our customers want. And organizations, I've worked for so many different sorts of companies. Car companies want to sell cars. Like, yes, of course you do, that's fine, but what do people want and why? And I do think marketing is here to constantly be that voice of the customer, the client within an organization, and champion what they want, of course, with a commercial common sense. Like, I want to sell the cars too, but I actually want people to want them. I don't want to just shout about them. So I think that will also remain a role that's important forever, probably.
That's so interesting. We haven't had champion before as a word. We see a lot of that's a unique one. It's a new one. Perfect.